to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Sometimes people ask me, who did you play guitar and do that solo yourself? And I say, no. You know, I've been playing guitar since I was a kid, but just for fun. But I had that done by a DJ, that intro music, and there's 7 layers of sound in there. And maybe one day I'll do a show just on what the heck does all that mean. And so I hope you like it. We're excited to have with us today a special guest, Michael Cowl Gordon. He's in the green room. I hit a button there, and you actually teased you, and you got a sense of he was sitting there kind of like Santa Claus waiting to come on and bring us some Christmas gifts. But we are going to talk about a lot of things today, but I want to tell you what we're doing. We're live streaming. Live streaming, if you're not aware, is the next generation of broadcasting. It's really, we're live. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you're on the feed, you can watch us. There's a chat feature. We encourage you to put a question or two in there, make some comments, and maybe that'll end up on the screen as part of the final production. This will be produced as a international podcast, as a live stream YouTube video in the future. And I already see that we've got some people coming on and watching us. So thank you for being here. Now, usually I say other podcasters will pre-record intros of their guests and do it later and add it on. I'm going to do it differently. I asked Michael Gordon, I said, why did you want to be on my show? What's your gut punch? What's your story? And he wrote me something. I'm going to read it to you. He says, I've spent my medical career in the practice of addiction medicine. Although while in medical school, I didn't even think about this specialty one time. However, upon graduation from medical school, I had a mental health and family crisis, which interrupted my planned training in internal medicine. I spent years surviving and feeling sorry for myself. I sought relief through religion, first through a strict Jewish observance, and then I took a tour through Christianity. I first was involved with the Episcopalian denomination and the Roman Catholic approach. My family situation after 7 years resolved thanks to my wife exiting our marriage, and I know he'll talk about that. And during the 7-year period, several things happened that formed the basis of the success of the past 50 years of my life. 1, I completed training and opened a family practice of medicine. 2, I found a niche in working with alcoholics and their families. 3, although I ultimately did not find religion to be my answer, I did have a spiritual awakening and found myself believing in a higher power. And 4, I discovered the power and efficacy of the 12-step program and learned to use them successfully in my medical work as well as in my own life. Now, we're going to be talking about his book today, and his bio is in there. Let me just tell you a few professional things about Michael. He is an MD. I opened the first detox program in Madison, Wisconsin under the decriminalization of alcoholism statute in 1972. What were you doing back then? I know what I was doing. He became medical director of the Anderson Alcoholic Rehab Hospital in Janesville, Wisconsin. And in 74, later joined the Center for Psychiatry and the staff of the Bronner Psychiatric Institute of Atlanta. He's now semi-retired, but remains in practice as the medical director of the Berman Center. And lots more great things. I learned that he's got some wonderful little furry friends that he hangs out with in his home. So I think he's sitting in the green room there, either blushing or saying, Tom, why did you read all that stuff? So let's bring him on the screen. And welcome to the show, Michael Gordon.
Well, thank you. It's a happy event to be here with you, and I appreciate the invitation.
Well, you're very welcome. And I want to do something to honor you, but also tell you how special this show is. I've never done this before. Don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm going to try and spotlight with another camera or something, see if I can do this. Everybody, you can see a camera here. I'm going to try to turn it around. And I've never done this, but today is a first. That is a picture of my daddy. My daddy was 26 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he passed away sadly in January 2018. And so I love my dad, but everything that we're going to talk about today, sir, from you is a real gift. And I think there's going to be millions of people out there who are going to watch this episode. So let me just bring you back on screen. So, yeah, so I mean, I learned about you through your book. So have you got it there with you, the book?
I do.
Can you just hold it up? Let's take a look at that. All right, and just read the title. Read out the title for us.
The title is The 12-Step Pathway, A Heroic Journey of Recovery.
Aha, look at that. Dueling books. I got it here in stereo. And the cool thing is that Michael was so kind. He actually, one of the gifts, everyone, is when an author does publish a book, sometimes they'll sign it for you. He wrote something to me. You can see I've already marked it up. I'm going to reveal a review for you. And I'm going to make a shout out before we get into the conversation with you that everybody, authors work. I'm an author. We are not known. The way we get known is I'm going to ask you to please find Michael's book. It's online or at your favorite store. Go buy it. And then once you've read it, post a review, goodreads.com, amazon.com. That tells the world about it. It gets the bookstore sales reps excited. And so, Michael, let's start off a little bit about you. We're going to go into what's called Plato's Garden. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, so stand by. We're going to put something on screen here. And just let me pull this up. And there we go. All right, so you can see something on the screen there. And welcome to Plato's Garden. Now, this is a segment we've been doing for a while, and you can see a picture there. Now, Plato's Garden was, somewhere outside of Greece, and it supposedly is a place that Aristotle and Plato would hang out, and, they would just, there'd be a lot of wisdom and knowledge exchange there. I put a definition on the screen for those who are watching us. You can see this. Those who are on the podcast later, you'll have to listen. So Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of the Platonist school of thought and the academy. And the word academia, A-K-A-D-E-M-I, is from somebody named Academus. So this was the first institution, Michael, of higher learning in the Western world. Now, I've just started my doctoral degree at a university in London, and I'm blessed to be doing that. And there's 3 words that they've been teaching me: knowing, being, and doing. It's really a different way of thinking. You may know some of this, but I think we spend a lot of time just being, in our lives and what we're doing. But it's really looking deeper behind those things to find the threads of our stories and find out more about what the true meaning is. So here's where we get to have some fun together, Michael. We're going to call this the influences of context for today. So I've got 3 questions on the screen. And everyone, we're about storytelling, but the 3 questions are really designed for Michael and I to have, primarily for him to have an open conversation. So, Michael, why don't you read that first question out, and then I'll get you going into that.
Sure. Number 1, macro. What was happening in the world around you that may have influenced your public works?
All right, now I'm going to lead you a little bit because your life has been long, lots of wisdom. I was reading in the book, and I believe that there was a magic moment. I'm just going to look in the book here in the introduction. You went to your first AA clubhouse on Carroll Street in Madison, Wisconsin, to a meeting as a guest. It was November 1972. And would it be fair to say that the period, if we talk about the period that was the beginning of your public works, where you shifted into this whole journey of addiction and support through your work, would it have been around that period of time?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't you talk to us? What was happening in the macro world? Just talk about the world around you. Any special events, things you can remember?
Well, so let's talk about the addiction world. Things were changing, and people were starting to recognize that alcoholics were sick people as opposed to derelicts. In the 1950s, the American Medical Association adopted a position that alcoholism is a disease. And I don't think that should have been necessary because it's obviously a disease. And as long ago as the time of the American Revolution, Dr. Benjamin Rush said it was a disease. But there was a general awareness within society that alcoholics need help. They don't need to be locked up. And pretty much the view of alcoholism was that it was a weakness of character. So that was changing. What else was changing? Alcoholics Anonymous had become a mainstream organization.
Yeah.
Starting in 1939, it started to grow dramatically in the 1940s until by my time there were hundreds of thousands of people in recovery through AA. Bill Wilson, the main co-founder of AA, had just died the year before in 1971.
Yeah. Yeah, I was one of the things I wanted to ask you is when you talk about alcoholism as uh, a disease versus what? What would the without that definition, what would it be? Would it have been considered?
A moral weakness.
Yeah, that was quite a striking remark, and I think everybody just again we're with Dr. Michael Cowl Gordon here. The word weakness of character. It's interesting when we talk about that. Can you take a look back in the world at that time, just macro, so not at the industry that you worked in, and what if I was to say to you the leaders of the world at that time during that era, would you characterize the leaders of the world as having strong character? How did you see the world during that, say from 72 for that 20-year period?
Well, you're asking me to think very hard, and I don't know what success I'm going to have with it. Yes, there were world leaders that I thought had great character,
Yeah,
and others who did not. Others who did not. For justice is a very important uh, quality to me,
yeah,
and I could name people who were very justice oriented and people who were much more interested in power and holding on to their power, acquiring and holding on to power at the expense of other people. So
absolutely.
that battle was going on. I think it's always gone on, and it's still going on.
Let me read something from the introduction of the book, and then we'll get into question two. And by the way, you talk about it, thinking hard. Uh, Everybody, if you read when you read the book again, we'll talk more about the book. You are a hard thinker. There's no question about it from what I've read here. In the introduction, I just capture this. In the world in which we all now live, the hero is not called on to don a suit of armor, climb on a white horse, and slay an actual fire-breathing dragon. Rather, the dragon we are called to slay is the inner dragon, an aspect of the self that is remarkably elusive and self-destructive. The inner dragon, not even aware of its existence, and lasting his journey of discovering my own limitations. And why I brought that up is that I'm fascinated about your thoughts on leadership or leaders. I look back in history, in American history, and look at presidents. Gosh, it's a very high pressure world. Some of these leaders, and alcoholism plays into it. And as I was reading your book, I started thinking about that. I wonder in the quiet rooms of places where leaders are making decisions that affect their lives, how many are struggling in desperation, or how many are in AA? Just fascinating for me to think about and put that to the audience. Let's go to question number two. I'm going to read it out loud. Mezzo is really, Michael, it's the industry, in your industry, what was happening that might have influenced your work. So I'll just start it with this comment that your industry, I'm suggesting, would have been the medical profession. Just fill
Sure.
in that. So you were a doctor, or you're doing some things, and then what was going on in the industry to transform you in your direction?
Well, it was going on. One thing that was happening as a result of alcoholism being decriminalized all over the country is that the requirement was set up to take public inebriates to treatment as opposed to jail. So detox facilities were opening up all over the country. The other thing that was happening is that group insurance was required to cover treatment of alcoholism. And
Hmm.
I know in Wisconsin it was a joke. The first coverage, I think Blue Cross allowed $500 a year of
Wow.
treatment for alcoholism. So
Goodness.
that's kind of remarkable. So that's one thing that was happening in my industry. Another thing, I was not acknowledged. My field of addiction medicine didn't have a name. Nobody called it addiction medicine.
Yep.
And my medical colleagues didn't see the value of referring patients to addiction medicine treatment.
Hmm.
It just didn't happen. So I would say in my first few years of treatment, um, I don't think I got one referral a year from medical colleagues. In fact, when we went into Janesville and set up the treatment program, one of the family doctors in Janesville made a complaint to the State Medical Society that he thought a scam was being perpetrated and wanted an investigation.
Hmm.
So that's what was happening in my industry. Did
That
it
is,
influence?
yeah, yeah. Sorry to step on you. You
No,
just
no.
you evoke something in me. That's remarkable. I mean, I gotta
Oh,
honor you
great.
because you obviously were there. I think about the experience I had with my own father, who was an alcoholic most of his life, and then recovering. But to think about today, how if you even breathe a word to your doctor that you're struggling with alcohol, whatnot, one of the very first tools is AA. And I think I shared with you, Michael, that just recently a good friend of mine passed from cancer, but he was in AA most of his life, and we had the funeral or the celebration, and they asked me to speak at it, and like there was 150 people there. I know Canada is a smaller country, but that's a large amount of people, and most of them were through the community of AA. They just found their way, and it was remarkable to me how many people have benefited from that. But to hear your comments, so thanks for sharing that. Let's go into
Sure.
the let's go into the last part, everybody. So we're in Plato's Garden with Michael, and what we're really doing is we're looking at hearing what was going on in the world in his industry, and now the one that is deepest, I think, is what was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public works. You wrote me some wonderful things that you apologized was too long, and I said no, I want more. But there, if you're willing to, just talk about your life. There were many things that you wrote to me about. Just tell us. It's part of the story.
In 1967, the year that I graduated from medical school, um, I met a woman who turned out to be mentally ill and also to have an issue with addiction to prescription medication. So while I had gone to Madison, we had gone to Madison for me to continue training after medical school. I got so depressed that I couldn't function in a training role, and so I took a leave of absence. And in fact, eventually I had to resign my position because it wasn't getting any better.
Yeah.
I tried to get help personally, and she started seeing a psychiatrist, and things did not go well. Well, um, I um, I felt that I might get a better grip on my life if I looked into religion because I had, well, I grew up in a Jewish household. A lot of, well, first of all, a lot of young people are pretty agnostic and, if not atheistic, and that's
Yep.
certainly true among young Jewish people. Well, that wasn't working for me. So I said, well, let me try this religion stuff. And I pursued the Jewish religion in a much more observant way for a couple of years. And it was interesting, but it didn't really improve the quality of my life at all. And so I said, well, this is not working. Let me pursue my wife's religion. She was Episcopalian. So I read the New Testament. I started going to church. I was baptized, and I tried that, and that didn't work either. Uh, One night, the Episcopal priest was over at our house, and he and my wife got roaring drunk, and they had a huge fight,
Goodness.
argument fight.
Yeah.
And after that, she said, "I'm not going to that church anymore." She decided to go to Roman Catholic Church. Well, I didn't care one denomination from another, so I went to the Roman Catholic Church for a couple of years, and although that was also very interesting,
Yeah.
it didn't do much for me in terms of the quality of my life. What did a great deal for me was two things. One, I got interested in alcoholism and was invited to AA, was educated about the 12 steps and about the recovery process. I found out about Al Anon, which is the family program,
Yeah.
a companion to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to implement these principles in my life with tremendous benefit. The other thing that helped, quite frankly, is that the marriage dissolved. Uh, she got involved with somebody and took off, and uh,
I was
that
just
was
gonna
the,
I was
that
gonna
was the
jump
end
in
of
there.
that.
I'm gonna
Sure.
jump in there because we're storytelling. First of all, I want to say I honor you for being so transparent. Everybody, this is leadership at its best. I mean, we're talking about humility. Michael's written the book, and many of the things that he talks about here that you've heard are also in the book. And so I recommend getting it. Hold that book up again there, Michael.
I just happen to have it right here.
All right, there it is. Say the title for us again.
It says The 12-Step Pathway, A Heroic Journey of Recovery.
Fantastic. I just gonna. I'm in the studio here, and I happen to have a wonderful copy of the book here, and I'm just gonna read something caught my attention when you were talking. I decided to dedicate my professional life to working with alcoholics where I could be useful. At the same time, combine the power of spirituality, not religion, with my medical training, and then you go on to say that it's really about identifying your own limitations through that process. I want to talk a bit about before we get into the nuts and bolts of the book, because everybody, this book's unique. It ties in the learnings of what Michael's found through AA, but also this thing called The Hero's Journey, which is based on another narrative, which, congratulations. I've never read a book this way. I think it's the first of its kind. I think really this will be a book that'll be around for a long time. That's fascinating. The depression piece, and during the time where we were going through that, because I've had a brain injury at 18, and many people watch me know I went into depression quickly. Depression, everyone that I know the definition, Michael, you can add to it or correct me. When I went through therapy was 2 or more weeks of sadness without a trigger. So, sometimes your dog dies or your cat dies and you feel sad, but if there's this feeling of despair and you can't figure it out, and that's what I started to feel, is because I cracked my head in a bathtub, and I really, my life stopped, and I was running a business and all these things you see me do today. And I had suicidal ideation, which was very complicated. And eventually I had to seek psychiatry. I still see a psychiatrist monthly, which, by the way, Michael, I always say get a checkup from the neck up. It's the best thing I ever did. This doctor of mine is part of my care team, and it's wonderful. So let me just ask you that during your time going through these difficulties, you did you turn to alcohol, or did you never
I
drink?
did not. I did
And
not.
what do you think drove that, the behavior, or that? Is it just that your family never had uh, exposure to that, or?
Well, no, my father was an alcoholic, although reasonably functional.
Yeah,
And he didn't create any, there was no hollering in the house or throwing things or
I
anything
see.
like that.
Yeah,
But it's in the family, and I'm quite sure on my mother's side there was also alcoholics, but uh, the myth that Jewish people don't have problems with alcohol is just that, it's a myth. Uh, so no, I didn't, and well, I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails
wow.
to controlling. Every day was a desperate day in which I was just trying to get by.
Yeah,
And I thought that if I drank any amount of alcohol, that would cause me to lose my grip. So I did, at that time, I did not drink.
I see. Thank you for sharing that with us. Again, I shared with you, and my father was a pretty outrageous alcoholic in terms of it was started with he was born in Fiji, but it was started in the military, and he became a commanding officer. And I was homeless at age 12. The whole family my dad pretty much destroyed everything in his life, which is part of the book that I love about this is you've written. People have given their stories, which you can tell us how they're written because they're actually beautiful. But as we wrap up in Plato's Garden here, let me just summarize a couple things. Would it be fair to say, Michael, that the world around you defined, and it was changing, and then in the industry there were changes that were occurring that you mentioned to us, and it led you down the path of this new discovery through AA. You were invited as a guest, and then you dedicated your life to that. Would it be fair to say that you also saw something in AA that you felt you needed because of all these things in your life?
Well, I certainly wanted it, and I probably thought that I needed it as well, but I didn't think I qualified.
I see.
But when I discovered the companion family program called Al-Anon, I realized that anybody could use the 12 steps and apply them to whatever difficulties they're struggling with in life.
I see. Okay. That answered my question. So we're going to say thank you for you in Plato's Garden and leave that garden. And that's just a wonderful segment that you gave us. And everybody really is a lesson to see how someone with such wisdom, like Michael on the outside, you see him as a semi-retired medical doctor who's dedicated his life in this area to helping people with addiction. But you never know the story behind it. It was just remarkable. Let me just take this off the screen here and bring you back on. And so that brings us into the book. Now, tell us about why you wrote the book, and the structure of a book is very unique. So you've brought these two worlds together. Heroes, this Joseph Campbell work in AA.
So the first question, why did I write the book? Well, two parts to that. The first part is that 25 or 30 years ago, I had a patient who was admitted to our treatment program. Our treatment program leased some beds to a Christian treatment program. And so they were applying wisdom and beliefs of the New Testament to mental health recovery, addiction recovery. But they didn't have their own doctors. They had their own other staff, but not their own doctors. So they were using our staff. And so I was assigned to one of these patients. I went to see him. His main agenda with me is to explain to me that he's not a Christian. I mean, this is not a problem for me, but he wanted me to know why I was there, why he was there. He was there. He knew he needed help with his cocaine addiction. And he was at our particular program because his wife and her pastor wanted him to come to that program.
Mm.
Okay. So I said, well, what do you believe? He said, well, I'm a follower of Joseph Campbell. Have you heard of Joseph Campbell? I said, yes, I have. But I'm not as familiar as I might be with Joseph Campbell. So tell me what you believe. And he said, well, Joseph Campbell said that God is beyond all categories of human thought. Therefore, any dogma that a religion puts forward can only approach but not really reach the idea of God in its exactitude. So, well, I thought, okay, that makes sense. So I went home. I got a hold of Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces, The Power of Myth. And I found the actual quote, which was, eternity is beyond all categories of human thought.
Mm.
But it was the same idea that it's, Campbell said that it's not possible to think about God as God is. And well, certain religions, I think any religion would disagree with that, and I don't have an argument with anybody on that score.
Yep.
But I was very attracted to the idea of the hero's journey as a model for addiction recovery.
That's amazing. Everybody, we're talking to the author of the book, The 12-Step Pathway. Michael, in chapter 1, I'm just going to throw this out for you to talk about. It says a heroic journey, a quest for redemption and wholeness. Actually, if you can do me a favor, everybody loves to hear an author read a paragraph out of their book. Can you open it to page 7 and just read me the first paragraph there? I highlighted it because I thought it was worthy of getting you to talk about.
The first paragraph. This is a book about becoming heroic. A hero faces great danger, overcomes incalculable odds, and accomplishes what would have been thought, especially by oneself, impossible to achieve. Considering the fear and pain that such a person must experience in such an adventure, it is a role that few would desire. Yet more of us find ourselves in circumstances demanding heroism than one might imagine. In fact, I suspect that people who are never called on to become heroic are in the minority, if they exist at all. Some, of course, are heroic on a grander scale, such that their names and life accomplishments are household knowledge.
Thank you. What a gift. Thank you, Michael. Everybody, when you hear an author who's written the book, read it. It adds meaning. I'm just going to read a little bit from the next paragraph and then we'll talk about it. This is not a book for people who might want to become heroic someday. It's for people in the midst of a crisis whose very lives are threatened and who must decide if they are going to face their situation, survive, rise above themselves, and then share their newfound knowledge with others in need of salvation. Tell us more about this hero's journey and also just quickly who Joseph Campbell was for the audience.
Joseph Campbell was a philosopher. He was a cultural anthropologist. He was a genius. He was greatly attracted to mythology. And in fact, he took the road less traveled because he abandoned his PhD program. Got books and went into the woods for 5 years and read them. So he was a remarkable guy. He wound up at Sarah Lawrence College in New York teaching, and he lectured about mythology and the heroic journey. And so he had the thesis that all societies have a heroic myth. And that myth informs them about who they are. It tells them why their own society is important. And it encourages them to face their own lives, knowing that the founder of their society was heroic.
It's
So
fascinating.
that's Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, we'll put go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so his life ended in 1983 or thereabouts. He was very popular in his lifetime. And Bill Moyers interviewed him, and he was really very popular. His ideas have really taken hold, and he's still very popular. People, a lot of people that I talk to tell me how attractive they are to Joseph Campbell and his ideas. Now, the heroic journey, I've done a lot of reading about it, as you might imagine, and different writers have different takes on the heroic journey. So I'll tell you what I got out of it for the purposes of my ideas. And one is the onset of a heroic journey is the call to adventure. The call to adventure is where the hero is challenged by something. In the case of alcoholism, the hero is called on to stop drinking, to overcome his addiction, something that he has already found to be impossible to do.
Yeah.
May have quit for a few days, a few weeks, but always goes back. And so the call to adventure is the beginning of the journey. The second stage is the refusal of the call. So the hero says, I don't think so. And that goes on. That can go on and off for the lifetime of the alcoholic.
Yep.
But let's just say that the part of the call to adventure is the promise of help. And so the hero hears, you've got to do this, and I will help you. You can be successful. And so there is the acceptance of the call to adventure and the acceptance of the gifts. Now, can I go on and say what this means to the alcoholic?
Yep.
So, yeah, so because this answer gets long. So what does the alcoholic get as a gift? It gets a community of recovering people. The alcohol is accepted into a community of recovering people. And here's for the first time in a long time, we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do, we have all done. And we're happy. And he can see that they're happy and that they're sober. And they say, this is what we've done, and you can do this too. And you should get a guide, a mentor that will help you through the process, which in AA they call a sponsor. Mm-hmm. And so the sponsor and the program, what they learn is the next stage of the journey is staying sober in the exact same world in which they could not stay sober. And there's a second journey involved, and that's the inward journey. This is the self-discovery. This is the self-examination. At AA, they call it a fearless and searching moral inventory.
Yeah.
And so this is a process they go through. And while it's intimidating, they're encouraged to do it, and they get the help that they need. And then the next stage in this process is confession. So they have to tell someone what they've discovered. And AA talks a lot about God. And they say they have to talk to another human being and to God and tell them who they really are, who they have been, what their character has been like.
Yeah.
So I could go on, but maybe you don't want me to.
Well, actually, no. I think we could do multiple shows with you. Let me jump in there just because we're trading stories. There's so much. When you say something, my brain goes on a journey in so many directions, and so it's my turn to maybe be a little verbose with you. I want to show you something. I want to show you something in the camera here. If I can just make this look good. Just going to put my pen down. Never done this before, but let's look what's tattooed on my shoulder. The hero's journey narrative. That's actually the hero's journey narrative out of his book.
For goodness sakes.
And that's why I say, like, I believe in my faith, but I believe that whether it was intended divinely or not, you and I met for a reason. How come you're talking to a guy here, me, who you're telling me about the hero's journey? I'm saying, hey, dude, I got it tattooed on my shoulder. I've read the book and I get it. And this is remarkable because, like many of us, we discover things through the beauty of others. Excuse me. One of the things that you said, I wrote down in my paper here, was about sponsor, community, and there was some feeling of when you're in that community, you're accepted. People accept you. There's trust.
Right. Hope.
Dr. Gordon, I want to just say that one of my fascinations is neuroscience. You can see in the back there in my studio, I got a picture of a replica of a brain. I actually bought it and took it apart to try to figure out what was going on in my head. And I'm a big fan of a fellow named Dr. Paul Zak, who's actually studied storytelling. And he studied in his lab, and he's written a book on this too. And what happens during storytelling, he suggests, is there's two brain chemicals that are released. One is cortisol, the most common ones, cortisol, and then oxytocin. And what's interesting is cortisol is, and I read this in your book, you're very up on neurotransmitters and all the way the brain works. So this is why you got to pick up his book, everyone. But in storytelling here, you're saying something to me. You're telling me the story. And what you don't realize is when you were talking about your life and your first challenges and things. I was getting this pit in my stomach because I was starting to go, oh my goodness, me too. Being through that, I kind of, and then there was a cortisol release, and I'm starting to feel some of this. I'm leaning in, I'm listening, what's coming next, but then there's fear, and that fear was being triggered. But then when you said some other things about your story, and you're starting to talk about how you're helping people, I'm going like that guy's just like me. There's that oxytocin that's released, and there's that trust. Now that trust that I can trust you and I can tell you about things that I maybe wouldn't tell others. We can just pause for a minute because I'm going to edit that out, so we'll let that go to.
Sorry about that.
That's. I was going to say that's not your sponsor calling, but you don't have. You don't have.
I have a sponsor.
You got to teach your cats to answer your phone. By the way, I was going to say something funny to you that do you think if cats could drink they would, and what habit do cats do that would be their version of an addiction? You can think about that one. But let's go back to what I was saying. So 3, 2, 1. That what I understand is people just want to fit in. They want to belong. And I was telling everyone, I was telling Michael that a good friend of mine just passed away from cancer at age 80, but he was lifelong in AA, just like my father was. And when I went to the celebration of life, there was 150 people in the audience, and they were all, many of them were coming up, and they were from this chapter of AA, they were from that chapter. And what happened with my own dad is I was estranged from him, Michael, most of my life since he left home. And something in your book I read, which I'll bring up in a few minutes with you, that triggered that story of my whole childhood over again. It was like I read one of the stories and went, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. And so I hadn't seen my dad, and then somehow I was brought to him at a Starbucks a few months before he died. And I missed him. I wanted him back in my life. We took that picture I showed you earlier. It was the last picture of him. And he was so happy. He said, I love you, son. He said, I release you. I'm so sorry. And he wanted to tell me that all his life. And Michael, that was the first time in my life that I'd ever remembered that my dad loved me. I think searching all my life for significance and being a CEO and awards and doing things, chasing something that was missing, I didn't understand as a child that he loved me because my brain didn't know the difference between his behavior. And I'm getting to a point here so we agreed to have coffee once a month, and I said, let's go slow, Dad. We took the selfie, we left, and then my mom phones in January and says, I'm sorry to tell you, your dad had a heart attack, and he passed. And I remember going to the funeral of his, and I have 2 brothers, and I'll talk about this openly with you. I love my brothers. One is very much still an alcoholic, struggles, his whole life, has a mental illness. And the other one, high pressure job, similar, not an alcoholic, but the place was full of people, and I did the eulogy, and afterwards all these people are coming up to me, and this woman comes up, she says, Tom, your dad was a hero. The exact words, he was a hero. He saved my daughter, and she's pointing to my daughter, and then these other people said, your dad talked about you all the time, and I heard things like your dad was a pillar in the community, and he helped so many, and he would go into prisons and help people, men's groups. And I went, are you talking about the same dad? Like, my dad was a villain in my eyes as a child, but now I'm hearing he's a hero. And so it was that exact journey through 26 years, all the people he went out and helped because of the program in AA. And the sad part is I didn't go to one of his cakes. I didn't go to one of his meetings because I was so angry with him. But today, if I was to do it all over again, I would. The reason why I'm telling you that, Michael, and I'll finish with this because I know that was a lot, but it's in honor of the work you're doing because you bring it out. And if you bring it out of me, you're going to bring it out of anybody who reads your work. And this is helping me heal. If you could just go to page 41 in your book there.
Okay.
And so I'd like you to go down to the last paragraph there. First, just read the title at the top, and then where it says sometimes the call to adventure, read that paragraph right up to the boss who gave them one last chance. Just read that out loud for us.
Well, I don't have that on page 41.
Oh, 43. Sorry, 43. It's my eyes again.
Right.
And tell me when you're ready, because I'm going to full screen you. We're going to put this in the
Okay.
videos. All right, so 3, 2, 1, go ahead.
And this is from chapter 4, entitled The Call to Adventure, steps 1, 2, and 3. It says, sometimes the call to adventure can be dramatic and glorious, such as Moses being called by God from the burning bush. When alcoholics receive the call to adventure, though, you'll seldom hear harps or singing angels. Alcoholics receive the call when waking up on the bathroom floor in a pool of vomit, waking up in jail once again, not remembering just how they got there, or waking up in bed with a stranger who was also in the dark about the events that led to this disgraced condition. Or they receive the call when they are fired by the boss who gave them one last chance. I had a friend who received the call to adventure when he walked into his garage one morning to find the front end of his truck caved in and covered with blood. How had that happened? The last thing he remembered was being at a bar drinking with friends.
Wow.
In AA terminology, it is called hitting bottom.
All right. Thank you. We honor you, everybody. That was read by the author, Michael Cowl Gordon, of his book, The 12-Step Pathway, a heroic journey of recovery. And I want to talk about that. My goodness. I mean, the beauty of this book is you've written it in a storytelling way, obviously, but I want to just pose this to the audience, Michael, that for all of you out there who never experienced alcoholism in your life growing up as a child or youth, and as Michael read that paragraph, especially the circumstances of someone, answering the call and all these things going on, think about how that made you feel. Think about how it's like it's a movie. There's no way that happens. So now I'm going to go back through that little paragraph you read, and I'm going to show you all the Me Too's in here, which totally opened me up. And it released something in me that made me better, Michael, just because you wrote this. So everyone, when it says that you seldom hear harps or singing angels, alcoholics receive the call when waking up on the bathroom floor. Let me just put this so you can see me in the studio there. I'm reading in a pool of vomit. We would have drinking parties at home, 30, 40 people, 2, 3, 4 days. That's what my dad, he was a teacher educator, but that was my life growing up until as much as I can remember. We had people in our house lying on the floor in pools of vomit. I remember finding my father who would come home at 2 a.m. That was his general routine. And he would just be making so much noise. He was violent, physical, so I took the brunt of that too. But, in the morning you would find his pants and his clothes like a stream from the front door all over the place. And he would black out. He would never remember it. Here's another one, waking up in jail. I never forget the time my brother and I got a call, and we, remember, we're young guys, and we got a call to go down and pick up my dad from the local jail because he drinking and driving. And we literally went, it was so hard to see your father that way. He pointed out some guy, he said, see that guy over there? He's got my boots. And because my dad had no socks or shoes on. And this guy in the jail, I guess, threatened him and took his boots and his socks. This is what was put in my brain as a young child. Just a couple more things here. Waking up in bed, the pool of blood on the front of the car. Thank God I don't have that story in my life. However, one of the things that made my dad hit bottom is his boss, who was always at our house saving him, eventually fired him. My dad was a breadwinner. And also my dad always was drinking and driving, and he was charismatic, so the police he had buddies in the system, and he broadsided a woman in her car and almost killed her and her baby. And that was literally part of the story that I remember. That was all part of his hitting bottom. And so I just want to say thank you, everybody. It's really hard to read these stories if you're somebody hearing it for the first time and you didn't. But Michael, as you know, and sir, you've dedicated your life to people like me and my father and others. This is what we lived with. This is why we needed to go into, my dad needed AA, where there's like, well, you too. I feel comfortable here. I can talk about this. So thank you.
Real, isn't it?
It is. So I want to ask you a question, and just as we're going through here, the the hero's journey and the steps in the hero's journey. I think there's 7 or 8, so we won't have time to go through it all in the show, and it's not intended. You'll come back, people will get the book. But let me ask you this: my father had the call to adventure to go seek help, and he never did it. Why do people not answer the call to adventure? In your experience working with so many people, what gets in the way?
I'll give you at least 2 answers. One is that that's part of the heroic journey to refuse the call. It's
Wow.
just part of it. It's just part of it. So why? There's a process called denial. Denial is a ego defense mechanism,
Yeah.
which prevents people from seeing painful reality in their lives. So they have the same facts before them that other people do, but they put it together differently. And some of it they don't see at all. They don't see how they act really. They think they're being charming and
Yeah.
social, and they're actually being obnoxious, for example. And they don't see that. So then there's a lot of fear involved because if you think about it, alcohol at one point in the life of the alcoholic, most of the time, has been a successful coping mechanism. It's been what keeps the alcoholic going. It
Yeah.
gives them courage. It gives them a sense of well-being. It even defines them socially as with their group of the guys down at the tavern, or the fishing buddies, or the ladies' afternoon cocktails, or whatever it might be. Um, and so it's not noticed when it transitions from being the help of the alcoholic to the problem of the alcoholic. It's not noticed.
Yeah. Very interesting. So you've helped me there, and I think about that now about my dad. And then they're reading in the book, everybody, Michael, you talk about how some will go into AA, but then I don't think it's called relapse, but then they'll start drinking again. And tell us about this. What blew my mind was the comment that when you relapse, it's actually, it seems to be worse than when you were drinking before. Why does that happen?
Well, so that's a good question. I don't 100% understand it,
Yep.
but um, alcohol and drugs change the brain
Yeah.
and establish a response pathway to the alcohol and drugs. And when drinking or drug use resumes, it triggers that same response pathway at the same level that it had been established, and or worse,
Yep.
gets worse. So that's my best answer to it.
No, thank you for that. We didn't talk too much about your dad, and sadly, I know your dad eventually passed. I read something in the book. You said he was an alcoholic, so he was functioning, and I know a lot of people who probably are. Uh, do you think you had an interest in this area of helping people because of the experience with your dad? Was part of it?
No, I don't think
Yeah,
so. As I was growing up, I really didn't think of him as an alcoholic.
I see.
So we had problems in our home, but they centered around my older brother's autism,
I see.
which was, oh my gosh, what a terrible situation that was. And there was no help available at the time. He was never properly diagnosed. He
Wow.
received no help from medical or psychological
Yeah.
people, and drove my parents crazy, embarrassed me. It
Yeah.
was a sad situation. He actually came out of that pretty well as an adult,
Well,
all
thank
things considered.
well, thank God for that. It's funny. Another thread in the story. Well, my younger brother has Tourette's, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, and
Sure.
it's horrible. And yet, it was the same thing. We think that it was my parents. They didn't see it. My dad used to poke fun of him. He called him sort of like the home jester. He's always doing goofy things. But we think it was triggered by the trauma in the home of the time that that we were. My dad was in the military, by the way, as a commanding officer, and you talk just give experience around my brother. We didn't know he had Tourette's until I think, and then he started drinking, and he just disappeared. He dropped out of school, and today he can't really work and be effective in life. And I sometimes wonder were my parents lost in their own pain. Because my mom was always on drugs and medication for depression, and she's trying to raise three boys. And this is my dad was never there, and all this. I sometimes wonder if that distraction, when you talk about children who experience maltreatment growing up, just what an impact this has on them. I found some research recently because of my doctoral that the brain doesn't develop well for a child or effectively in order to deal with stress when they grow through maltreatment. And there's many definitions, and that was my childhood. So I would simply tell you that there's this thing, just so you know me, there's this, it took me a lifetime to figure it out, and I live well with it because I learned, but you have a fight or flight response that you're aware of. And I read somewhere that someone referred to it as a smoke alarm. So this fight-flight response is there because we're always looking for danger. Can we be safe? Well, my smoke alarm stays on all the time. And I would be when I became a CEO at age 31, that was because I was an overachiever. Michael, I would sit in rooms with people who were raising their voices or things happened. And what my brain saw going on out there was danger all the time. And so this led my life. I was running away from my career and success at times, things like that. So thank you for writing this book, because some of the stories in it, just talk about that. You've written the hero's journey narrative and explained that connected to the AA process, but you've put some stories in there. Tell us about that. How was that done?
I thought it would be important to have some storytelling as part of the book. And so I asked people, I told them what kind of a book I was writing. I asked them if they'd be willing to write their story. And most people said yes. Some of the people that said yes didn't actually do it. But I wound up with 8 stories. And I think they're excellent stories, and they portray in one way or another the disease of addiction and the heroic journey of recovery.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, I analyze the stories. So I demonstrate in what way some of the points are made. And there's also a workbook at the end of the book, which helps people examine their own situation.
Yeah, that's notable. When with the review I'm writing for you, I'm putting that down as one of the benefits of the book. Everybody, the workbook is towards the end, but it's a great tool, Michael, for helping. As I said, I just came from a place where 150 people were there that probably would want to have a tool like this. I think you need to write 2 more books. One is, and I'd be happy to give my story if you ever do it, is one is through the eyes of children and youth who become adults who live with alcoholics. That would be interesting to read because we always read stories of alcoholics, but I never read many stories of kids I'm not an alcoholic, although I've struggled with alcohol at times, using it to deal with pressure, stress. And the second one would be, if my cat was an alcoholic. We were just talking to everyone, and Michael's semi-retired, but how many cats do you have?
We had 4 until about 2 weeks ago. We now have 3.
Oh, I see.
Our little girl, she basically died of old age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for cats do seem to get high on catnip, some of them. Although I don't know that it disrupts their life in particular. I think there has to be some consequence of that. Some cats develop obsessive or compulsive behaviors of one sort or another, which can be harmful. Eating certain things that are not really edible, and then getting obstructions and so on. Dogs do the same thing.
Yeah. Wonderful that you love and value pets. I think that's a blessing to them. The part about the book itself and the structure, everybody, I just want to do another shout out. So Michael, can you hold that book up one last time? We're just going to put you on larger on the screen. Just read the title out again to us.
The book is The 12-Step Pathway, A Heroic Journey of Recovery.
And how can people get a hold of that book?
You can buy it wherever books are sold. Online, if you ask your local bookstore to get it for you, I'm sure they will. So I hope people read it. You know, I wrote it. This was a COVID book. I was confined to my home because of immune deficiency.
I remember that.
Yeah, so in 2020, I decided to write a book about this topic, and so it's a COVID book, really.
Yeah. I want to just also say that because it was in the notes you sent me, and I'm sure you're fine with it. It was at 2019. You had a medical condition that was diagnosed.
Right.
Tell us about that and how you're doing.
Well, I'm doing fine. I was diagnosed with a form of lymphoma in, I guess, April of 2019.
Yeah.
And I was told it's an aggressive form of lymphoma, and I went to Emory University Clinical Cancer Center. I met with a top specialist. They said, we'd like you to be in a study. I said, fine. So they're working me up for the study. They did a bone marrow biopsy, and they called me up and said, well, you also have multiple myeloma.
Oh, goodness.
And so I had two very serious forms of cancer without having the first symptom of either. I felt fine. And anyway, so I went through a few months of chemo. Then I went through a bone marrow transplant. And I'm in remission, and I've been in remission ever since. I'm on maintenance chemo, but it's just one tablet I take a day. It's nothing serious.
I'm going to have to edit that out. Did you catch that? I hit the wrong button, and here I am wanting to honor you with applause. You're in remission. And we laughed at you.
So I thought the audience was applauding me. So.
Well, we caught that too, but there was this one.
Oh, well, yeah, cancer's pretty funny.
That's how Canadians laugh, by the way. We say sorry and we laugh at everything, which is part of how we stay mentally healthy. Well, congratulations on that. That's another show about cancer. I've met so many people, probably more aware too, because I've never dealt with it personally with people in the last year or two that gone through that journey. So I think it's amazing. The 12-step program. I wanted to ask you one more question came to mind about Al-Anon. Who's it for? And, should I have been somebody who found that? Because I never really understood what it was.
It's for the family members and loved ones of an alcoholic.
Yep.
Yes, you could have utilized it. You still could utilize it.
Yeah.
And it's an exact replica of the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 steps in Al-Anon differ from the 12 steps in AA in one word only. It's the same 12 steps.
I see. That's good to know. I'd like to get a book and read some of that, because with the work I do, I come across a lot of people, children, youth, family members. Mm-hmm. There is one thing that's been on my mind about AA that I'd like to get an expert or somebody with your wisdom opinion on. You see, I always thought my dad struggled staying, because abstinence is it's like here, either here or here. So staying on track. And then when I slipped into my depression from my concussion, Michael, I took CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I did group therapy. I did everything. I started learning about the brain, and now I'm specialized in neuroscience. And somebody told me when I was looking for a counselor, don't go find somebody as a counselor who puts their head down, takes notes, and it just has you talk about your problems. And then I started thinking about these sayings that people say, you are what you talk about. And then the brain can't have a positive and negative thought at the same time. I understand, I think, but at the beginning of all AA meetings, and even at the funeral I was telling about, somebody in AA will say, my name is Tom Dutta, I'm an alcoholic. why do we do that? Does that sort of suggest that what you said, it's a disease and you're always an alcoholic? Or is by focusing on it and going and hearing the problems over and over again, is that a rush? Are people connected to that? Or how do you stay on track? I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I hear more than one question here.
Yeah, tell me what I'm trying to say.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I've never been to an AA meeting, so is the meeting where people just talk about their challenges all the time?
Well, so some meetings have speakers where they tell their story, and stories are very, very powerful ways of teaching.
Yeah.
And people can hear in the story something that they relate to themselves. So that's one type of meeting. Other type of meetings are discussions where somebody introduces a topic.
Yeah.
The topic would have something to do with recovery, the 12 steps, maybe a topic like resentment, self-pity, humility, something like that. And so there would be a discussion along those lines.
I see.
I'm sure you could go to an open meeting. There's two kinds of meetings, closed and open. And closed meetings are only for alcoholics. Open meetings, anybody who has a legitimate interest can attend. And so you certainly could.
I think that's wonderful. I'm very interested in that. One more quick story for me is I did a TED Talk in 2020 called How Leaders Can Lift the Stigma of Mental Health, and I did that literally a year into my injury, and if you haven't seen it, I'd be honored if you looked at it and gave me some feedback.
Okay.
In trying to get my TED Talk done, one of the topics I wanted to do was about forgiveness because my father had passed, and they didn't accept that as a topic that would work. So anyway, when I got my TED Talk accepted, this guy calls me. His name's Ron. I won't tell you the last name. And he's in my Toastmasters public speaking group. But he also was involved with the TED stage that I was trying to get into. And he said, I didn't want to tell you this because it would have influenced you, Tom, because he's involved with the organization. And I'm involved with them too on a volunteer, Michael. He said, I knew your dad. And I was just floored. He goes, I knew your dad. And he said, your dad used to run the men's group and take us for meditation. And he said, Tom Miller was my dad's sponsor. He said, I know Tom Miller. And all of a sudden I'm going like, this is another fortuitous intersection in my life. Now this was 2020. All of a sudden this guy pops up in my life and he knew my dad. And he not only knew him, but my dad's spending this intimate time with his group. And then he introduces me to another fella, and this fella knew my dad too. And at the funeral I was telling you about, the fella that we honored, his name was Hattie Abra. Hattie wrote a book as well recently called Shackles Broken, Dragons Slain. He was in AA a long time. And as before Hattie died, I spent a lot of time with him, and we started talking, and he mentions Tom Miller. And I said, who's Tom Miller? He said, he was my sponsor. I said, he was my daddy's sponsor too. We're coming from two different parts of the universe, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded, and they were always there, but I'm surrounded by all these people that are connected by threads to AA and my dad. And I'll tell you, man, there's a part of the world that we're missing, because I just think some of the people in AA are some of the most strong and powerful mindsets that I've ever met.
That's interesting, considering how people view alcoholics as weak.
Oh, now that I've learned, so by the way, everybody, Michael's book, get it, read it, review it. But now that I've learned by reading your book and all these things that happened only in the last few years, absolutely not. In fact, what I saw, Michael, and I know you know this from your patients, what I saw my dad have to do to stay off alcohol, I think people in AA are some of the most strongest people in the world. Because there are people who have never come from maltreatment like I did, and they can't deal with the car, having a flat tire on their car. They get stressed out. But think about a life with addiction where you have to live with that. Just so you know, to honor my friend Hattie, his son passed of suicide. That was one of the contributing factors to his beginning alcoholism. and he was in he was in Corrections Canada, which was the prison system helping. He became a counselor through AA. But he was telling me the same thing. He said, when I go into prisons, Tom, he said, half of the people in there, they're so angry. And, they've got all this stuff built up from their childhood, early years. The addictions are part of it. So it's amazing work you're doing here.
Thanks. If I can comment on something you just said, talking about people putting so much effort into their recovery over an extended period of time and being of service to others. This is also part of the heroic journey. The last stage of the heroic journey is the return to the kingdom with the treasure.
Yeah.
You return home to your home community with whatever, as Joseph Campbell called it, a boon, whatever thing of value you have found that your community needs. And the community needs plenty of recovery and plenty of blessings. And recovering alcoholics have a lot to offer, and they do so, they say, selfishly in order to stay sober. But that's somewhat disingenuous, because there's a real heart to give and
Totally.
to see other people find what they have
Yeah.
and what they've discovered.
Thank you for saying that. Those are great words. I mean, you talk about treasure. We got something for you as we're wrapping up in a few minutes about treasure. That's one of the things that came out at this celebration we were doing for my friend recently was I think I did have to speak. So I was really difficult for me to know what to say. But I just want to tell you this, that in the last 3 months after he was diagnosed with cancer, he went to the hospital and then eventually palliative. I went, and I put this in my speech, I went and spent 3-4 days a week with him. And I never had that chance to do that with my own dad. And it was like he was my dad, and I was learning through him. And it was the most freeing thing. I would even, say I love you every time I left, and we would do some interesting things together. I said at the funeral, I said, when somebody helps you, like Hattie had this fun thing. I went to his house first time when I met him just years ago, and he was a painter. So he was a counselor, 40 years in AA, as a painter, and he was full of life. And he had such a positive mindset, Michael. In fact, they called him Happy Hattie. And he was a war vet. He had polio. There's so much to him, but he was in my Toastmasters speaking group, and I would hear him speak about his life. And something passed between us in the speaking group. I didn't know about his son and all that, and he started looking at me, and we connected. And so I go to his house, and he says, come, I'll show you my paintings. He's got paintings on the wall. And there's one that's a llama, the animal a llama. And this llama is big and tall, and its head's up. It's got big white bucky teeth, and it's smiling. And I said, what's that? And he always used to talk, because he had polio, with a bit of a Sicilian accent. He'd go, Happy Hattie, Daily Llama. I said, did you just say the Daily Llama? Happy Hattie, Daily Llama. He created this character, the Daily Llama, like Dalai Lama. And he wrote blogs, and all he did, what I learned was, and I said that at the funeral, when Hattie figured out what he was given through AA, he has to give it back to the kingdom. He's out there, and that's all he did, is he went out and he helped so many people. So much like the stories that are in your book. I want to honor you with something before we wrap up here. As I said to my wife before we did this show, I said, we're going to go over time. And it's been over an hour. And Michael, it's been a pleasure. I hope it's been a good experience. But this is what can happen when we're talking about something you're passionate about and it connects. I'm going to put the screen on here. And so you're being given an award here. And let me just show you. You probably know about this from my other show. But it's on the screen in the back, but I thought I'd go get one. And we created this coin when I launched the show. It's a challenge coin. Have you heard of these?
Yes.
So AA has its different chips and coins, but these are used all around the world now. And they started in World War II, and soldiers would carry them to commit to each other in community. And they would have fun. If you didn't have yours, you bought drinks, etc. I wanted something that was unique, and that the people coming on the show, only the ones coming on the show who have gone through challenges and turned it into purpose, actually make it on the hero's journey narrative. So these are hand painted and crafted in the U.S. They're raised letters. They're beautiful. So that the front is that, but you know what's on the back? I thought you might get a kick out of this. It's Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey narrative. Fully illustrated. Who would have thought, huh? These were done in 2017, and there's about 45 a year that go out across the world. And so, welcome to the Quiet Warrior community. You're officially now one of the Quiet Warriors.
I'm honored. Thank you.
You deserve it, Michael. There's so much more we don't know about you that we'll be finding out. So, on that note, tell us where people can get the book if they want to connect to you.
The book can be purchased wherever books are sold. You certainly can go online and get it. Or you could ask your local bookseller to get it for you. You can reach me at my website, michaelcowlgordon.com. There's some things there that may be of interest to read, and I have a few blogs there. And also, you can connect to me through an instrument on the website.
That's fantastic. Well, everybody, again, I'll just plug the book, The 12-Step Pathway. This is a very unique book. Please get it, make a review. I'm going to just reveal now I've written your international review for you. That'll be posted on Amazon.ca, 5-star review. And I talk about the structure of the book, all the reasons why it's a unique, one-of-a-kind, and I recommend it highly. So thanks.
You're very kind.
Thanks for blessing us. And we're connected for life. So I hope one day we can speak together, or I can come visit you. But again, continue doing what you're doing. You're really, truly a hero.
Thank you.
Four words I wrote down on my paper here that were words I thought of talking to you were wisdom, maven. A maven is somebody when you think, who can I go talk to about this subject, Michael? Humility. There's this calming effect that you have. It's amazing. And then leadership. You truly are a leader. You're forging a space. I know I can't stop talking because I get verbose on this, but one more thing came to mind. In studying neuroscience, if we're wired for storytelling narrative, and you know this, so everybody, one thing I learned is if you talk about facts or figures, there's no emotion attached to it. When you add emotion, which is a story, then the brain can move it to long-term memory, and the brain actually can choose. It loves stories because you get that oxytocin and cortisol. One of the breakthroughs I had about the work you've done, sir, and I don't know if you've seen this, is you've actually taken a 12-step technical program and you've turned it into a storytelling narrative, which is so much more palatable to get people interested in why should I do this? And so on that note, I think this book is just amazing, and congratulations on that work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Well, like you heard from Michael Cowl Gordon here, find that true passion and purpose that you have in your life, and live the life that you deserve and desire. And we'll see you all again on the Quiet Warrior Show. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Stand by. I'm taking us offline.